Welcome, this is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Who are the three most dangerous people for a woman to talk to when she's struggling in her own marriage? We're going to talk about that today. Welcome to Faith Influencer. This is Jim Cunningham. This is a subject, like many of my subjects, that actually come out of real life counseling or situations that I've been involved in. And so I feel like it's something that can be addressed, because if someone I'm talking to is struggling with it, then probably a lot of people are struggling with it. And so this is one that I'm very familiar with, because over all of the years of working with people, this one shows up so often. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the most frustrating things. And some of the things that I really want to say on the subject, I'm not going to say, because it would be out there and come across as angry or whatever for me to say it. We'll see when I get there. Who are the three worst people for you to talk to? So let me dial this in. So ladies who are listening, you're going through a difficult time in your relationship, in your marriage. And this is a blended family podcast, but it's all things marriage. So what happens is that when you're struggling, women, like it or not, more than men, talk to other people, talk to other women in your case. Not always women, but we'll get into that. You want to go talk to someone, but who you talk to becomes one of the most critical things that is going to predict what happens to your marriage going forward. You say, that sounds really serious. It is very serious. And so I want to talk to the three worst people for you to turn to in your struggles with your spouse, okay? So the first two are going to be somewhat predictable. The third one that I'm going to give you is going to shock you, but at the same time is going to be the most heartbreaking and dangerous person for you to talk to in these struggles. So let's walk through them. Let me set this up by saying this. If you're hurting right now, who you run to next matters. It matters hugely. It matters because you're hurting emotionally, which means that you can be very vulnerable emotionally. So who you talk to is going to become a predictor of what happens going forward. Think about this. You're angry, or you're lonely, or you're disconnected, or you're confused, or you need validation. You want someone to tell you you're right. You want someone to tell you deserve better. You need someone to say to you, you don't deserve this and you don't have to put up with this. You want someone to tell you those kinds of things. But here's the problem. Pain makes people reach more for comfort than for wisdom. Sometimes you don't want to hear what you need to hear. Sometimes you want to hear what you want to hear, what validates what you want someone to say. So, some listening ears do not help you heal your marriage. As a matter of fact, some of the people you turn to will help destroy your marriage. Please hear me. They'll help your marriage go down the drain faster than it's already going, depending on who you turn to. So, let's walk through the three most dangerous people. The first one's pretty obvious, but let's go ahead and touch on it again. The first and most dangerous, one of the most dangerous people for you to turn to is another man. So I'm talking in particular to women. I've already said that sometimes emotionally you may be in a vulnerable state. It is that predictable guy at work who listens, and you're not used to it because your husband's not listening. So listen real careful at this point to me, okay, ladies? Lean in just a little bit and listen to what I'm about to tell you. One of the worst things you can do in your marriage conflict is to have another man as your emotional support. You are playing with fire. You're about to step off a cliff. You're about to go down a road where there is no return. Another man is not to be your emotional support. Absolutely playing with fire. Now, let me clarify. I'm not talking about counseling. I'm not talking about a counselor. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about another person who's a friend or someone you work with. You cannot turn to another man. Do you know that affairs, emotional affairs, rarely start physical? Almost 99% of the time, they do not start physical. Affairs start emotional. They start, let me say it this way. When I say they start emotional, do you realize that most of the affairs that happen in our country start conversational? They start with conversation, not with a physical affair. They start because you're talking to someone and he listens. They start because he understands and he validates you. And he says, I can't believe your husband treats you that way. Or he says, I'd never do that to someone. And he's fulfilling a need that you have. And it is true, your husband should be fulfilling that need. But if he's not, there's no place for another man to step in and take that role. So now what happens is that when a man begins to listen to you and he begins to validate you and he becomes your emotional support because he's so gentle, now an attachment begins to stir. And when this attachment begins to stir, it goes back to the saying again that affairs don't begin with lust. Affairs begin with loneliness. Affairs begin with emotional connection. And so here's the danger. When you become disconnected from your husband, attention from another man feels like intimacy. Let me say it again. When you are emotionally disconnected from your husband, attention from another man feels like intimacy. That's a feeling that you're longing for, intimacy. And another man's attention feels like that because you're disconnected from your husband. Many of you right now know exactly what I'm talking about. You're either flirting with that right now or you've been through it. So the enemy of your marriage is the person who understands too well what's going on when you are at your weakest. That's the enemy. That's that other person. Someone said, be careful who gets access to your emotional world when your marriage is hurting. I think that's so good. So good. I'm going to say it again. Be careful who gets access to your emotional world when your marriage is hurting. That's who you cannot talk to. So, first, when you're hurting and struggling in a relationship, do not turn to another man. That's the worst thing you can do. Do not turn to another man. And some men aren't trying to help you heal. They're waiting for an opening. Okay, let's move on. All right, who's the second person? The first, predictable. Don't turn to another man. Who's the second person, the most dangerous person that you can turn to? And I'm going to say to you that this might be my most frustrating of the three that I'm going to give you. The third one's going to be the most surprising to you, but this one may be the most frustrating. This is the one that I have to bite my tongue a little bit. The worst person, the second, that you can turn to when you're having marital conflict is that bitter girlfriend of yours. That bitter friend. The friend who gives her advice from her wounds instead of from wisdom. The person who's been hurt herself, so she's speaking out of her hurt. That is the worst person. That is absolutely who you do not want to talk to. I'm just telling you that there are some women who just love emotional drama. And if they can get involved in your emotional drama, that is what they live for. Do you know women like that? Now, sometimes you may be talking to these women because they're helping you meet some needs by validating what you're saying and agreeing with everything that you say and throwing in their own issues, and you just have a pity party with each other. Listen, there are women out there who just want involved in your drama. And when you involve women in your drama, and you know it's true, you know that you get on the phone and for hours go over drama is so frustrating to me. And we guys don't get that. Now, I'm not saying that guys don't talk about drama. Guys do talk to other guys, but I'm going to tell you that guys do not talk to other guys like women talk to other women. Guys don't go complain to other guys about their wives. They may talk about it. There are conversations that happen. I'm not saying they don't do it, but it's nothing like what happens when another lady has a bitter friend. So she's going to come to you and say, well, you ought to leave him. She's going to come to you and say, men never change. They're always the same. She's going to say, don't put up with that. You deserve happiness. That's what she's going to say. You deserve happiness. Why are you living in that? Why are you staying there? Why are you putting up with that? There's some old sayings that still apply. Have you heard this one? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. That's a really old saying. And what it's really saying is that there is hardly anything more vile than a woman who is living in her unresolved hurt. She's going to spew vile. Let me give you another one of those old sayings. I was looking these up and I thought, wow, these are still good. Here's another one. Hurt people often recruit people into their hurt. Your girlfriend who's hurt may just be recruiting you into her hurt, and you're recruiting her into your hurt. So you're not going to solve or resolve anything when you get together in these kind of scenarios. Let me give you another one. Be careful getting relationship advice from someone whose pain has become their personality. You know someone like that? Whose pain shows on their face? I mean, it's just carved lines through their face, and it's carved ruts through their personality. Their pain has become their personality. They can't get out of it. They just live in it, and they're vile. Why would you turn to that person? I mean, just common sense. Why would you turn to that person? Let me give you the last one. Some people don't give advice to heal you. They give advice that validates the bad choices that they've made. They're just trying to feel better about themselves. So they're giving you the same route they took. And if you take it, and many of you do, and this is why this is so frustrating to me, if you take the same route that your friend whose personality has gone down the drain because they're so filled with bitterness and anger, if you follow them, you're going to become just like them. You don't want that. You don't want that for your family, for your kids, for your own life. Get off the phone with her. That's not who you want to listen to. So many hurt people want to give you counsel from their unresolved pain. They're not going to help you at all. They're going to bleed all over you. So be careful taking marriage advice from people who are still bleeding from their own unresolved wounds. Don't take advice from them. So don't turn to another man. That makes sense. Don't turn to your angry girlfriend and try to get advice from her. She's just going to validate your pain, and she's going to push you down the same trap that she went down. Now, here's the third one. This is the most surprising of all. This is the one that hurts me the most. The one previous to this about women getting together and just griping and complaining and spewing anger, that frustrates me the most, but this one hurts me the most. This is one of the most common, and the reason why it hurts me the most is because so often it's unintentional. Some of you right now are making one of the biggest mistakes, and you have no idea what it's going to do to someone that you love very much, and that is a child. So many women turn to their daughter as their listening ear. Now, I'm not talking about a grown daughter. I'm talking about a daughter who still lives at home. Maybe she's a young teenager. She could be 8 or 9. I see it all the time. And many studies have been done about the effects of what happens when a mother turns to her daughter as her confidant, as her listening ear. Let me just walk through some of this. This is probably the most damaging of all that we're going to talk about. So, one of the worst things a mother can do during conflict is turn to her child, and here's why: is to turn to, especially to a daughter. One, a daughter's not your therapist. Why are you talking to your daughter about your marriage relationship? She's not your therapist. She's not your daughter was never intended to be your emotional support system. That is never, God did not give you a daughter so that she could prop you up emotionally. That is not her role. She's not supposed to carry marriage pain, your marriage pain. She's not supposed to bear that burden. You're not supposed to go to your daughter and lay all of that on top of her. And when you do, and many of you are doing it, and right now some of you are shocked because I'm saying this to you and you've never heard this before. Let me tell you what you're doing to your daughter when this happens. It's actually an emotional term called parentification. You're turning them into the parent. And the psychological research on this is incredible. It's when a child, psychologically, it is when a child emotionally becomes the caretaker of the parent. There are so many homes like this, where the child becomes the caretaker of the parent. And when that happens, here's what happens to your daughter. Whether she's 8 or 9 or 12 or 13 or however, she becomes responsible for you emotionally. You're laying all of this on her. She becomes protective over you. By the way, from a father, do you know why that's a frustrating thing for a dad? Because we know that when your daughter becomes protective of you emotionally because you're laying all of this on her, she becomes angry at her father. And when she becomes angry at her father, this is an emotional burden that doesn't just go away. And so let me tell you what happens next. What happens if later then mom reconciles with dad? Mom reconciles with dad, but the daughter doesn't. Inside, she's still angry at dad. Inside, she's still carrying these emotional scars at her father because you, mom, put that on her. So, do you feel the weight of what you're doing when you force your daughter to grow up earlier than she should because you need an emotional crutch? Do you feel what's happening to her? And it will affect her whole life unless she later learns to deal with it. So now the marriage needs to heal and the mom moves on, but the daughter can't. And later in life, the daughter is still struggling with that. Children were never designed to carry the emotional weight of adult marriage problems. Say it again. So when you make your child your listening ear, they stop being your child. They stop being your child and they become your emotional crutch. Don't do that to your daughter. If you've done that, go to your daughter and say to her, you know what, I put you in a position that you should have never been in, and I'm sorry for doing that. It sounds so innocent, though, doesn't it? It's you going to your daughter and say, can I talk to you? I need someone to talk to. Sounds innocent. Or you go to your daughter and you say, you know what, I can't talk to people outside of here. You're the only one who understands. Sounds innocent. Or you say, I need to talk to you about some situations, but don't tell your dad. Don't tell your dad. So now the child is carrying this emotional information and it changes them. That's why this is so heartbreaking. I can remember years ago I was visiting with a husband and a wife, and they had come in for counseling and they were trying to work it out, but the mom had turned her daughter into her emotional crutch. And I said to them, I said, let me tell you what's going to happen to your daughter. and I probably said it in a way that was a little too strong, but this is what I said. Do you know that the chances of your daughter having a child early on as a teenager have just risen greatly because of what you've put on her? And the mom said, well, I don't understand that. And the dad was just looking shocked, becoming more angry. And the mom said, I don't understand that. And I said, well, I don't know that I understand it either. But psychological research says that when you make your daughter an emotional crutch, here are the things that's going to happen. One, she's going to have difficulty with boundaries. That's proven psychologically through these studies. Two, she's going to have early sexual activity, chances are. Three, she's going to have unhealthy relationships. Next, she's going to experience anxiety and depression because you laid all of this on her that she wasn't equipped to carry. Next, she's going to have people-pleasing behaviors that aren't good. Then she's going to seek validation from others, especially through romantic attachments. This is what the psychological research shows. This is heavy stuff. You cannot turn to your daughter as your listening ear. So, what's the healthy way to handle this? What's the healthy way to handle when you're struggling? You don't go to another man. You don't go to another angry woman. And you especially don't go to your daughter. Let me balance this. I'm not saying don't get help. Absolutely get help. But talk to wise people. Talk to people who are trained in this area. Talk to a counselor. Protect your marriage covenant. Don't throw it away to some woman who just doesn't care. Protect your marriage covenant. Tell the truth. You need someone who's going to come to you and be honest with you, not just say what you need to hear. How do you know this person is a good person to talk to? Because they're honest with you. And a good confidant to talk to, here's one of the signs. They're going to try to help calm the chaos. They're not going to interject anger into it to create more chaos. They're going to help calm it. They're going to be encouraging. They're going to encourage healing, not try to push you apart further and tell you to leave him. A good person to talk to, you're going to know because they're going to be able to confront the wrong without feeding the hatred. So there are good people to talk to, but that's how you know. So you need someone who values restoration more than emotional drama. And that sounds weird to say, but there are so many people out there who love emotional drama. Stay away from them. You talk to someone who's more interested in your restoration. So, in moments of pain, who you talk to matters. It matters greatly, and it can affect everything that happens to you in the future. But the right voice is always going to bring healing and wisdom and humility and restoration. So, don't hand your marriage to people who benefit from its destruction. This is Jim Cunningham. Thank you as always for joining us at Faith Influencer. Look forward to talking to you next time. Look forward to your comments. Let me know how this has confronted you today with these truths.